Got my fishing buddy back. You know, we don't realize how precious time is until it's gone. My middle son was my fishing buddy for first few years after I bought my bass boat. I'd go there and nudge him, and he'd be dead asleep at 4:30 in the morning, and nudge him, say, "Hey buddy, you want to go fishing?" And he'd jump out of bed and let's go. And then there was like a year or two over the last 2 years where he just wasn't really into it. And I get it, kids, once they reach a certain age, their sleep patterns change and stuff like that, and they like to stay up later and not get up early. But he didn't even really want to go, later in the afternoon. I like to fish early in the morning and right before sunset, and he just wasn't into it for a little while. And this year he started wanting to go a lot more. And it just got me thinking, I was talking to one of my buddies the other night. We were at my son's baseball game, and he had texted me. He's like, "Man, it's raining right now, big fat raindrops." And I'm like, "Yeah, I know. We're at the ball field, and it doesn't look like the Blues are going to call the game, so we're stuck in this, playing in this rain." And he said, "Soak it up, dude, while you can." He's actually going through a pretty nasty divorce, and he's like, "I only get my son 50% of the time now. So soak it up while you can, man." And he's right. He's 100% right. And it's something you don't realize, when you have kids young, you don't realize it because you're still a kid yourself. And, my oldest son's 20 years old. And when, he was first born, I swear it felt like he was an infant for 3 years. But now my youngest son is just turning a year, and it feels like we just brought him home from the hospital yesterday. It's just crazy how perspectives change. My oldest son, when he was first born, he was like my full-time buddy. That's the greatest thing about kids, is when they're young, you're the coolest thing to them, especially boys. They want to do everything dad does, and then they reach a certain point, teenager usually, where they're into wanting to hang with their friends and their girlfriends and, stuff that they're into. And, when he was younger, like I said, he was my full-time buddy. At the time I was, building race cars and off-road race cars, and there's races all the time, or we just go out testing. And same thing, like my middle son with fishing. I'm like, "Hey, we're going to the desert, you want to go?" "Yep." He'd get my pre-runner, and we would head out to the desert and go to watch a race or go test some cars or whatever it may be. And you also become a better parent the older you get. Hold on real quick. Let me find my dog. Tucker, get over here. You also become a better parent the older you get. When I was talking to my buddy, that was another thing that I told him. I told him, make sure you stay close to your son, and make sure you're open with him, and make sure, he's only got the one kid, and he's not even a teenager yet. So, having a 20-year-old, I have a little bit more experience than him, but I was like, just be open with him and make sure he trusts you, and make sure he can come to you and talk to you about things and stuff like that. And he was like, "Yeah, man, 100%. That's one thing he was grateful for, was having a kid later in life." He must have been in his mid-30s when he had him. And back when we were living in California and we were training jiu-jitsu, one of the parents there, I would help instruct the kids' classes. Get your ball right here, Tucker. Get your ball. One of the parents of one of my students, they were older. They had their first kid together. He was like 50 years old. And we kind of became friends with them, and they invited us one day. We went out fishing. They rented a pontoon boat on this lake, and we went out fishing with them, and just watching him interact. So he was 50 when he had him. They were probably, the kids were like 5-6 years old, so maybe he was 55, 56 at this time. And just watching at the way he parented and stuff, it was just mind-blowing how much better of a parent he was than I was when I was 25 years old with a 5-year-old. And it just really makes me another thing I told my buddy the other day when I was talking to him is, the sad part is my youngest child, who turns 1 this month, is gonna get the best version of me. I've been through all the bullshit, all the him and his mom, my wife, we get along better now than we did when we were 20. Just everything, as a whole, our whole living situation, just our personalities, all the life lessons I've learned, everything is just so much different now than when my oldest son was little. And I don't know, just makes me reflect on being a better parent and being grateful for the time that I have with my boys. I had another friend recently whose wife just had a stroke. She's young, she's 32, I think, 33. And that really got me reflecting. I could have a stroke today and I would hold a lot of guilt, all those times that my boy said, "Hey Dad," after work, or something, "Hey Dad, let's go outside and play ball." And I was too tired or too lazy or made some excuse, like it was too hot outside to go play ball. And, I end up, after having a stroke and I can't play ball with him anymore, I'm going to regret all those times I turned him down. And, life's too short. It really is, and you don't think that when you're young. You don't think it's short. You think, people that are 50 years old, that's so far from you, but it's really not. Time flies. It flies by really fast, and the older you get, it seems like it goes quicker. Like I was saying, my youngest son is already walking. He's 11 months old, already walking. And, he's going to be a year here in about a week or two. And it just seems like we just brought him home from the hospital. I vaguely remember my wife even being pregnant. It just all flew by. And pretty soon, I'm not going to, my middle child, he's going to be turning a teenager here pretty soon. And he's not going to want to hang with Dad as much. And I'm just trying to make sure I build that relationship and get closer to him and be more understanding, less authoritative, and listen to him more. Yeah, I don't know. It's hard. It's hard, reflecting back on the past and just all the things you wish you would have done different. And now my oldest son, he's an adult now doing his own thing, and we butt heads over the stupidest things, and I don't know how much of it was what I taught him. And probably should start working on rebuilding that relationship. He went through the worst of it, unfortunately, when I was younger and partying and drinking, and then became a drug addict, and him and his mom and I fighting all the time, and living at his grandparents' house till he was a teenager. Just a lot of the rough aspects of my life, our lives, he grew up through, and luckily he turned out more like his mom, I guess. He's a little more cautious, a little more responsible, or a lot more responsible than I was, that's for sure. So definitely, time is too precious. Don't let it slip through your hands, you know. Dads out there, I know you're tired when you get home from work, but your kid wants to go outside and play ball. You never know when you're going to lose your fishing buddy. And I'm fortunate that he's taken an interest in it again, and I'm trying to absorb it as much as possible. You know, the unfortunate part is our lake is so low right now, all the ramps are closed. So the next closest lake to us is 45 minutes to an hour plus away from us. So we're gonna have to start dragging the boat all over Texas to go fish off the boat. But I don't know, we took our paddle board out the other day. He's got a little inflatable kayak. We went out, we had some fun. But it's just hard when they're that young, you know. You got to help them tie knots and stuff like that still. And, you know, they catch a fish, you got to help them get it off so they don't get themselves hooked. And everything that goes with it. It's definitely a lot more enjoyable fishing off the boat with him. But just don't take time for granted. You never know, like I said, when you're going to lose your fishing buddy or your baseball buddy or your whatever it is, whatever you're into, golf buddy or yard work buddy, I don't know, your shop buddy. I'm gonna leave this here.